Hey, we're Rage Badger Gaming, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive of the music note. The Soothsinger is the ultimate support, and this is my jam because I love playing support. And I'm just content to stick in the back and just give out buffs.
Yeah, and the funny part is you can actually play it very offensively. And the build we're going to do is kind of a hybrid where you will stay in the back and just provide buffs or debuffs, but you'll also be able to capitalize on some of its very good perk deck. But you're not going to be totally doing offense. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest things you'll be contributing is a mega debuff on enemies to make them very, very useless.
The Soothsinger has a low health pool, which honestly has never been an issue for me, and has a hand size of 9. And song mechanic, which is a persistent song that has different effects.
Yeah, either they're usually something like all allies get blank, all enemies get blank, or sometimes it's one thing when you do these things. So, but we'll go over some of those in more detail, but usually they just persist and you can scoop them up whenever you want since they aren't losses. Something you can do for stamina is very similar to the Mind Thief's augments. If you're at an odd hand size, so let's say you're going to long rest and at the end of the rest you'll have 7 cards, you can scoop your song off to be back at 8 and then play it the next turn. This means you'll have 4 plays instead of 3 during that next rest cycle. So we're going to build a somewhat hybrid Soothsinger, so you're not going to go full support, largely because I do want to take advantage of its very good perk deck. We'll talk about what items to use with it, and we'll go over some cards that we picked. They're by all means not definitive. However, we will go over some alternatives and why we chose them.
All right, here are the cards that we recommend starting with. And notice we have 2 of the X's.
Wistful Wounding actually is something to note. It's your only loot card. So if there's any scenario where you need to be able to loot stuff or you get a battle goal where you need to loot, you kind of need to take this, but it does let you loot, get experience, and perform an attack all with 1 card, so it's not necessarily something that's bad. Even at high levels, it ends up being pretty good because your perk deck scales very quickly, so even at level 8, you can bring this card and it won't feel like it's a waste of a slot.
And Nimble Knife is good because it has a move 4, and it's kind of a limited option for movement. And the top half, blesses are awesome, and curses are awesome.
Yeah, worst case scenario, if you're like, I have nothing to do, just bless someone, or if you need to move. There's options. It's one of the ones we'll put in rotational very quickly, especially starting at level 2. But it's definitely better than some of the other options you have at level 1.
One thing to note here is that your songs every round will give you 1 experience. So yeah, I had an easy time leveling up this Soothsinger.
Yeah, this was the first level 9 character we had in our Let's Play campaign, so there's no surprise there. As a matter of fact, I think that's the only level 9 we've had it at this point in the video. No one else is at that point. And it's very easy to get an oodles of experience, especially when you're like, all right, long rest, I get an experience.
The first song we're going to talk about is Power Ballad, and it adds +1 attack to one of your attacks. And that goes for everyone in your party.
Yeah, so it may not be a good buff for yourself, since you're not going to give yourself attacks. However, this works very well with parties that have either multiple summons or large party sizes. So if you've got a party of 4 and having 3 of them doing +1 damage every turn, that's good. This does also pair very well with summons with the Soothsinger, and we'll get more into that when we talk about its perk modifier deck. But take note, the more things on the board to take advantage of, this really adds up. However, if they're doing a bunch of AoEs and only adds 1-to-1, doesn't quite work out as well for that, but it's still decent.
Yeah, this is a pretty good initiative at 19.
All the songs actually have very early initiatives. And a lot of the other cards, like the crowd control cards, usually have late. So you usually have to try to pair a song with a crowd control card to actually make good use of them.
And the bottom half is a move to strengthen all adjacent allies in 1 experience.
Yeah, good way to give out free advantage, especially I'd end up using this with an ally that's about to do a big AoE attack. I'd like, hey, I'm moving next to you. Here, have some advantage. And then watch them. He's like, all right, I'm going to attack. There's 4 guys. And he ends up drawing 8 cards, taking the best of each. And it ended up adding up a lot. So it also allows you to move forward. And notice all songs also have experience on the bottom half of their cards too. So it stacks up real fast.
Next song is Defensive Ditty, +1 shield.
And the initiative 9s ends up being useful. I stop using this as regularly around level 4. We'll talk about that when we get to the level up cards, but until then, especially on low levels, reducing 1 damage off every attack ends up being incredibly notable. And the bottom half ends up being pretty decent as well if you end up, using the one of the other songs instead.
Yeah, I think I remember using this, negating next source of damage this round to 1 ally within range 2.
Yeah, so one thing I think is funny, when you end up fighting big things like rending drakes or bosses, you can just be like, okay, if we're only fighting this thing, congratulations, your next attack just does nothing. And that adds up a lot. So it's got the bottom half even as use afterwards, but I end up making this a little bit more rotational, but it's mandatory in my opinion, is level 1 through 3.
Alright, now we're going to talk about Throw Voice, and that is a 3-hex disarm.
Yep, no attack, just disarm. But it's a long range, it's a multiple 3-hex formation, and you can enhance it for 67 gold to be 4 hexes. And that, to some, that may seem like a lot, but I don't think it is for adding a huge... Actually, it's being a big attack pattern. And then you're saying, any enemy in this, their next turn, they can't attack at all. Which ends up being fun when you're fighting rending drakes. Not that I've definitely done that. It ends up being really great. So, Throw Voice is mandatory. Levels 1 through 9, you will always bring it, and ignore the bottom half of the card, just use the top half.
Alright, now we're going to talk about what cards we would choose as we're leveling up. And Brett's pick is Change Tempo, which is immobilize all enemies within range 3.
Ends up being incredibly good if you're fighting a lot of melee enemies, but also gives it finally a good movement too.
Yeah, I can concede that. But I liked using Soothing Lullaby because I'm all about the heals.
Yeah, and if you go for a song weaving strategy, which we'll talk about later, Soothing Lullaby ends up being very good for that. Especially, it's a good rotational pick if there's scenarios that have poison, wound, or both, as you can often use this just as a way to wipe all the debuffs off and then rotate to another song. Especially, yeah. It's especially good with wound, because then, like, everyone, heal 1. You actually pick the order all these land in, so you can say, alright, you heal 1, and the wound was supposed to do 1 damage, so they end up doing nothing. Effectively makes you immune to wound.
And our level 3 pick is Crippling Chorus. Top half is a loss. Stun all enemies within 3.
Yeah, it's especially good if you're like, this room is going to wreck us. It's something, due to the hand size, it's not a good idea to play it early. However, it's one of those where this can be incredibly impactful. Just saying, we're going to buy everyone around. Use this, try to go early, and then go early again. And you can just pile in your whole party doing a bunch of plays, just trying to deal with whatever room. It'll be worth it when all the enemies are just doing nothing.
Now the bottom half is a move 3, disarm one adjacent enemy.
Yeah, I ended up using this by running ahead where we had a group of people and running up, just disarm the person up front, and usually using something against the guys in the back. Pairing this with Throw Voice, I usually end up going in the middle initiative and disarming sometimes 3. I don't think I ever got 4 people in a round, but disarming 3 people in a round was pretty fun.
The level 4 pick is Disorienting Dirge, and I love this song.
If anyone's seen our top 10 overpowered cards video, this is on it.
Oh yeah! This song is the best song.
It is. This song is the best. It's not just a tribute to the best song, it is the best song.
All enemies gain disadvantage on all of their attacks.
I know, some people are like, hey, you know what? I always wear an iron helmet. And this basically is an iron helmet. We've never gotten crit when the song's in play, and there's no surprise. I think the worst, There was one time where we accidentally had to deal with like a +2, and we're like, oh, we took damage, guys, and we were very confused, especially given the amount of curses that the Soothsinger can put in the deck. Throw in a bunch of curses in there and just watch them just constantly miss and rarely attack with +1. Often you'll find that they'll draw those -1s all the time. So it suddenly feels like their whole deck feels way weaker. And it was about this time where I convinced my whole party, like, we should play on high difficulties just because we got this card. And the bottom card would be a loss for so many other classes. It's crazy.
So the strategy that I was doing was, because this bottom half is so awesome, I would play the bottom half like a couple times, and like I would put in the top half of this card later once the enemies had curses in their decks.
Yeah, and this is another thing you can do when I was talking about song weaving. You're like, well, I have to put one song into play. Why, if I'm not using this? Use the bottom half of this, because it's just, hey everyone, get some free crits. Hey enemy, you're cursed. And then put another song into play. If you do the Soothsinger solo scenario and play the song weaving strategy, that gets way better.
The level 5 pick is Melody and Harmony. And the top half allows you to play 2 songs at once. And I think I did this maybe 1 or 2 times. It's kind of hard to actually implement because you have a limited hand size.
Now, I had the intention of using this more often, but there's very few scenarios. I do think if you are playing Gloomhaven Digital, some of those scenarios where they're saying, hey, do this for 10 rounds, or hey, we're going to have you're stuck in this room, but enemies are going to be constantly spawning every round, like 2 elites per round. If you're playing at those, you're like, well, all I have to do is kill a certain amount in a certain amount of time. You might be able to afford to put this into play, have 2 really powerful songs, and just take control of a scenario. So it has its uses, but in addition to that, the bottom half ends up being very, very good.
Right, because it's a move 3 and an attack 3 at range 3.
And by this level, the worst you can have is 4 perks. At that point, with the Soothsinger with 4 perks, has gotten rid of all of their negative cards except for the miss. So they're down to 15 cards. You can further it by getting rid of those +1s and replacing them with +4s. Yeah, so you can actually, the Soothsinger deck actually, in its perk modifier deck, gets down to 13 cards really fast. So, and once you start getting more, you start like, oh, well, let me get rid of this +0, but it's now a +3 muddle. Let's get rid of this +0, but now it's +2 and curse. And the deck just becomes in what way do I want to ruin that enemy's life? And like, oh no, I'm going to replace this -1 with a stun card. So if you're like, oh no, that was my lowest damage attack 3 and stun. Or you can turn it into attack 7s or attack 5 and curse. It all just becomes crazy. So get those check marks, because your deck will thank you for it, and this card will almost never be 3 damage.
Level 6 is Provoke Terror. Not really musically themed name, but it's really good.
Yeah, I think they could have come up with, like, I don't know, Screaming Crescendo or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a 3-target stun, and stuns are my favorite.
Yeah, even if the bottom half, which is incredible, even if it was just the top half, it's really hard to just turn off a non-loss. Hey, everyone in this pattern, you don't get your next turn. And non-loss crowd control like that is insane.
Mm-hmm. And the bottom half is an attack 4 at range 4, and then you push them 3.
Yeah, funny part is I thought it was like, oh, this is just a good attack. With my good modifier deck, I'm going to laugh at how good this is. And the push, whatever. But the push actually ended up being really powerful, because there's one time where I'm like, all right, attack 4. I'm like, oh, attack. So now it's attack 6, because I drew a +2 in wound. So now they're wounded. And I'm like, hey, send him to the way back of the room. And he was wounded, and he had to spend a couple turns just to catch up with us, because he was 4 hexes away because of the range 4. I pushed him 3 away. I'm like, man, this guy's never going to catch us. And now he's bleeding. And I'm like, oh, this ends up being, the push ends up sometimes acts almost as a stun in some cases. So don't discount that. So this often can be used for crowd control. And even better, one time it's like, oh, I need to get to that door. Hold on, push that enemy into the trap. All right, way's clear. And it ends up adding to a lot of damage once you push enemies into those. So,
and that's on a bottom? Like, that's really good.
Yeah, this card's insane.
Level 7 pick is Nightmare Serenade. Now that's a name.
Yeah, that's a good name.
And the top half is add a curse to the enemy deck if they're within 5.
Yeah, this is just one that doesn't affect all allies, doesn't affect all enemies. If there's an enemy within range 5, just toss a curse in the enemy deck. It's pretty decent. If you end up being song weaving and saying, I need to do this, let me long rest, and then put that into play, scoop it up, and you can do some stuff with it, but most of the time I'm just using it for its initiative and its bottom half.
Yeah, bottom half is a 3-hex attack and curse.
The attack one, again, like I said, it usually ends up hardly being an attack 1, so you get to attack 3 hexes, and then use your insane modifier deck, do some damage, pop probably some status effects, especially at level 7, when you have so many perks that you probably have very little modifiers in your deck that don't have a status effect built into them. And then all survivors of that attack get a curse, and then you also get an experience. Ends up being more impactful than I thought. I thought, like, well, this ends up being pretty good. No, it's very solid. It ended up doing a very good job, especially if you have Dirge in play where they're constantly drawing cards. This allows you to use a bottom half to refill the curse deck.
And the level 8 pick is the other level 7 card. Booming Proclamation. And Brett, you want to explain why?
Again, insane perk modifier deck. The whole point of this is just to attack everything within range 2. Non-loss, everything in range 2 gets an attack. Watch as you draw your modifier deck, draw maybe a stun, draw that +4. You have 2 +4s in your deck by this point. And then you get to push all of them. So, again, are there traps? Are there any traps within range? You're attacking all enemies within range 2 and then pushing them too. If there are traps within range, they're all getting triggered. You are going to push enemies in whatever way you want. Additionally, there were some scenarios where they ended up crowding at the door, and I'm like, let me run up to the door, attack all of them, started moving all of them back, and then hitting all of them because they grouped up at the door. And I'm like, if you guys want to do that, I will attack all of you. So, but it's only an attack 1. It ends up adding up to a significant amount of damage. If this was using the Brutes perk deck, I probably consider other options. But again, you're the Soothsinger. I thought I'd use the bottom half in some scenarios where it's like, boom, all my allies get to make a free attack, and it didn't end up coming up, but I ended up using the top half a lot, and I ended up stam potioning it for it a couple times. So again, it sounds a little weak on paper, but in play, it's very, very good.
And the level 9 pick is Captivating Performance. The top half is +1 attack to all of your attacks.
All of them. Yeah, so earlier when we were talking about Power Ballad, I'm like, well, it doesn't affect AoEs. Now, if you have allies that can multi-attack, wow, watch this completely change some of those. Especially, wow. Especially some of those, can't talk about them, but you know those mega, they almost look like gigantic honeycombs. Like, what's this card? It just looks like this giant red blob. With this is funny, so strongly consider using this. However, I almost always only use this for its silly, silly bottom half.
Yeah, stun. Yeah. I love it.
Stun up to 3 enemies within range 3. Yeah, yes. That's all. Pick 3 enemies within range 3, just stun them. It has experience, but you're level 9, so it doesn't really matter. Maybe you get that battle goal, but if you have that battle goal that says get a bunch of experience, you're going to get it anyway without this. So really what it comes down to is non-loss, triple stun. Now, I know you already have that with Provoke Terror, but now they don't even, it's on bottom half, and they don't even need to be clumped up. You can just pick 3 within range 3.
So, you may be asking yourself, what is song weaving?
Song weaving is the idea of not just dropping one song and doing it the whole scenario, just leave this in play. Now, you might actually want to do that. We're not saying you have to song weave. We're saying it's an option because you can rotate between, like, especially if you picked Soothing Lullaby, being like, all right, well, first we're going to put Power Ballad into play. Let's hit hard. All right, we've gotten Poison and Wounded. I'm going to switch to Soothing Lullaby. All right, now I've put in enough curses. I've rested. Let's put Disorienting Dirge into play. And you just rotate between what's useful. Given that that every song have very, very strong bottoms, like Disorienting Dirge's Curse Everything, Bless Everything, Nightmare Serenade's Triple Attack Curse, Power Ballad allows you to move and strengthen a bunch of your allies that are nearby. you can afford to bring, and as a matter of fact, you're encouraged to bring multiple songs. So if you want to do song weaving, I strongly suggest you do the solo scenario, which says every time you drop a song into play, once you get that cool solo item, it does take up 2 hands, but there aren't a huge amount of handed items for the Soothsinger. But once you get that item, every time you put a song into play, you choose get a free move 2 or melee attack 2. So if you've moved into melee, let's say with that Crippling Chorus, you move 3 and disarm some guy. Then you put a song into play, use an attack 2. With your modifier deck, it'll be very good. Then watch as you all right, now we've gotten, maybe they missed a bunch because we've done some stuff, but now we need to get off that wound and heal. You switch to Soothing Lullaby and some other attack on something on bottom, like Disorienting Dirge. No, I'm not moving, that's a problem. But since you changed songs, you get a free move 2 as part of playing a song. It ends up adding up significantly, especially if you pick, if you picked Soothing Lullaby, you don't have that big move 5. So if you have a mobility as a problem, every time you put a song into play, move 2 for free. Since it doesn't have a tap, it just says you can keep doing this multiple times per rest. It's not necessarily a suggested strategy, because if you're that sounds complicated, just put Disorienting Dirge into play and just let it sit. That's not a bad thing. Thank you, Velvet. Even she agrees. So, let's say you're I don't want to do song weaving. I just want to stick to maybe a couple songs or just one song and drop it. What do you do with your hands? I don't know what to do with my hands. Yeah, like Velvet said. One thing you can do is bring a shield or volatile bomb. Remember how we said that Provoke Terror's Bottom, that attack 4 was really busted and you push a lot of enemies? What if you attacked in a 3-hex formation? Once per scenario, just do a bunch of attacks with an attack 4, then knock them all away. That's good for a one-handed item. Also, consider the Versatile Dagger, which says any top becomes a melee attack 3. So, if you're well, all I have is a song, I don't want to play Power Ballad, I want to leave Disorienting Dirge and play, just stab them. You can actually use this with, if you use the high mobility items, you can pair this with the items like Horn Helm, and Versatile Dagger to just turn any item into if you moved that turn, into an attack 4. Just stab them. It'll be fun. It's not necessarily an insane strategy, but it gives you, like the Versatile Dagger says, versatility. So an attack 2 is fine, but an attack 3 is a lot better. And you're probably not doing much else with your hands anyway. But those are all very good options. And if you want to go for summons, which I do suggest, if you've unlocked an item, there's a 2-handed hammer that says use it once per scenario and create a summon. Since that summon is going to do a nice attack 3 every turn using your attack deck, yeah. And not only that, but if the enemies are attacking it, they're going to have disadvantage because you probably have Dirge in play. So, or if you put Power Ballad into play, you can have them do even bigger attacks. Mm-hmm. Figure out what works best for you. But stamina potions are mandatory given the small hand size. Mm-hmm. If you have trouble with all getting stamina potions, you can use the Cloak of Pockets and any summon items you can come across. There's some that get unlocked with Prosperity, some are hidden in scenarios. But even the most basic summons become very good with the music note. If you watch our Let's Play, towards the end, if you check out our playthrough of Scenario 72, it shows me using 2 summon items on that scenario, which has a reputation for being incredibly hard, and watch as they start just kind of dismantling some of the enemies. Also, Scenario 21, I think I show off 1 summon in that one. So, the Soothsinger does a very good job with summons. They don't get any summons by default, but you can find creative ways to put them into play. Thank you, Velvet. So, we've been talking about that perk deck. Yeah, so what are the best perks to take? It's very boring.
Remove your negative modifiers. Thin that deck down.
Boom. Yeah, it makes it more reliable. First thing you can do is remove all your -1s. That takes 2 perks. Now you're down to 16 cards. The weird part is, normally they're replace a -2 with a +0. They don't have it. It's just straight up remove the -2. No replacement, just get rid of it. And your last card for removing, oh no. Remove your last negative card and replace it with a +0 and stun. With just 4 perks, you've turned all your negative modifiers into a single stun card.
One downside to the Soothsinger is that there is no option of ignoring negative status effects from the scenario or from items.
Yeah, so you're kind of stuck with whatever happens. Come what may, this is it. But the rest of the perks end up being really strong. You can, with the next 2 perks, you can get rid of 4 of your +1s, which sound like a problem, but then you replace them with 2 +4s. And then you replace a +0 with a +3 medal. I've never cared about the medal. I was just like, replace a +0, get rid of it, and replace it with a +3. That's all that ever added up to me, and it's great. After you've done that, consider adding the +2s by replacing +0s. So you can replace 3 +0s one at a time with +2 curse, +2 wound, and then +2 poison. At that point, consider adding the replacing the other +0s with disarms, immobilize, or adding the 3 +1s. The order isn't at that point super important at that point, but if you really want to add more curses, it's not that important once you've gotten all the 0s out with 2s. The rest of them aren't as big a deal, but you can replace the +0 with a +1 disarm. It's very good, but it ends up only being a small thing, and a conditional disarm is very welcome, but usually we're just kind of going for raw damage, and the other status effects are pretty strong anyway.
You have a bunch of gold. How should you spend it on enhancements?
Yeah, if you don't spend it all on those expensive summoning items, you can enhance it. I do suggest dumping it on improving a Hex to throw voice. It's only 67 gold, and it's going to be one of the best bang for your bucks there. If you do play with the Horned Helm build, which is not necessarily suggested, but you can always use the Talisman instead and just refresh your stamina potion. But if you do play the Horned Helm, turn that tuning the outcome to a move 4 and curse. That way you can get the benefit of both. If you don't like the Horned Helm build, which is perfectly fine, it ends up being notably more powerful in 2-player, but you can end up just considering maybe buffing Singing Arrow or some of the moves on the cards that you'll be bringing the whole time.
That wraps up the Soothsinger. Thanks again to our patrons, and we will be putting up a poll so you can vote on what class we're going to do deep dive next.
Did you pick any different cards? What items did you use? And how did your Soothsinger bring its way to victory? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you for watching.
For me.